What is growing on, gardeners? Peppers were actually the first plant that I ever learned how to master in my annual vegetable garden. In today's video, I am going to share with you all of the lessons I have learned over the last 20 years to help you grow the most incredible pepper plants you have ever grown. We are also going to be dispelling lots of pepper growing myths along the way. There is so much bad pepper growing advice out there, and I don't want you making these common mistakes that so many gardeners are misled to make. The first phase is transplanting and fertilizing. If you haven't transplanted your peppers yet, ensure that you amend the planting hole that you transplant them into with slow-release organics. My master blend of organic fertilizers is a mix of 3 to 4 parts of an organic all-purpose fertilizer, 1 to 2 parts bone meal, 1 part crab and lobster shell meal, and 1 part azomite in a big bucket. Then I mix it all together and I spread 2 tablespoons of the granular fertilizer into the planting hole at transplant. But if that sounds too complicated, honestly, you can just get yourself a good balanced all-purpose organic fertilizer and bone meal and apply 1 tablespoon of each to the planting hole. If you have already transplanted your peppers, don't worry. Just spread 2 tablespoons of the fertilizers in a circle around the base of each plant and then add water to water it in and help it break down. Organic granular fertilizers break down slowly over weeks by the microbiology in the soil, so they will trickle feed your plants as they decay for a long period of time. It's important that you amend your plants in this way every 2 weeks throughout the entire growing season. That way you always have some organic fertilizer that is in the process of decay and feeding your plants continuously all the way until frost. This fertilizing process is very important because peppers are actually fairly heavy feeders given their size. Just 6 weeks ago, all my pepper plants looked very small, and now they look massive. They are flowering like crazy and setting absurd amounts of fruit in there. So if you push these peppers along by giving them ample food, they will perform very well, and you will see explosive results. Now everything is getting overwhelmed by fruit, and I'm going to show you how to keep the production of these pepper plants like this, nice and aggressive all the way until the season ends. By the way, if you're enjoying this video from a real human instead of an AI voice, please consider subscribing to the channel. YouTube has actually deprioritized long-format creators this year in favor of promoting more shorts. So it's been really hard to reach new audiences with the change. Subscribing to these types of channels really helps us get the word out, and hopefully we can promote more educational content that actually makes life better, instead of more doom scrolling and brain rot. Your support is greatly appreciated. The next step is to give your peppers some support. Peppers can be planted fairly close together with about 1 square foot of space per plant. When you plant them in this orientation, as they grow in, they will almost kind of self-support themselves to an extent. However, once they start getting tall and they start bearing fruit and the fruit starts weighing them down, they do become vulnerable to wind and they can blow over. All of these pepper plants were planted with exactly 1 square foot of space per plant. There are 40 plants in this raised garden bed right here. Now, all of the plants have mostly absorbed the wind and have supported themselves, and they're doing a great job in general. However, you'll notice the plants on the end, which are the most exposed to wind, and they're also starting to set some fruits, especially this one right here. Well, you're starting to see the wind-vulnerable plants get blown over. Because of that, I need to start supporting my peppers because they're only going to get more overwhelmed by fruit. Now, one of the easiest ways that you can support a pepper plant is to just give them 1 stake per plant and then use an expandable vinyl tape to simply secure them to a stake. But when you have a big bed full of peppers like this, there's an easier way to do it, and it's called the Florida weave. I have 4 rows of 10 plants per row in this garden bed for a total of 40 plants. If I staked each one individually, I would need 40 stakes. That's way too many. So instead, I'm going to use the Florida weave method, where I'm going to take 5-foot stakes and put them on the end of each row. I'll have 4 on that end, 4 on this end, and then 4 in the middle of the bed in line with each row. Then we're going to use synthetic nylon twine, and we're going to weave around the plants every other plant, and that is going to support them. It's very important that you use a synthetic twine, not a natural twine like cotton, because that will expand and contract as it rains and it gets hotter and cooler. This is going to stay the same if it rains or if it's dry, if it's hot or if it's cool. I'm going to cut a very long piece of twine that's significantly longer than running it back and forth between each row. I've spooled up all of the additional twine, and I'm going to wrap it around the stake a few times and tie it off, making sure that I leave a lot of additional string that I could knot the excess to later. Now, what we're going to do is we are going to weave the plant. The string starts on the outside of the stake. I want to bring it inside of the first plant and then weave it. That is going to hold the plant up on one side. Then I'm going to bring it around to the front of the next plant. You're basically going to go every other plant. So you're going to weave back, front, then front. You're just going to repeat that process around every other plant until you get to the middle stake. Ideally, you'll put one stake about every 4 or 5 pepper plants or so. If you were doing this with tomatoes, you probably would want to do it about every 3 tomato plants because they're bigger. We tie it onto the end stake, then we run it around the back of this plant, then the front of this plant, the back of the next plant, the front of the next plant, and then we go to the middle of the stake where it is wrapped around that stake for support, and then we do the same thing. We go back, front, front, all the way to the end stake where we have tied it off and we have all of our excess twine. Now we're going to do the opposite. We have the twine run in front of this plant. We're going to run it behind the plant. Watch how this is just going to pick everything up. I have this twine run behind the back of this pepper plant right here. Then I'm going to bring it to the front of this pepper plant. This one is falling over. Well, I'm going to run the twine behind it, and then that is going to pick that pepper plant up. And then same thing with this pepper plant. This pepper plant has fallen over. It has the twine behind it. I'm going to run it in front of this one, and then I'm going to tie everything off to the stake. That's why I left the additional twine at the very end right here. I'll wrap the string around a few times, and then I will tie it off in a double knot and then just cut it. That right there is the Florida weave. You can stake an entire row of peppers in only about 3 or 4 minutes using this method. You just simply have to add a new string roughly every 6 to 12 inches or so. Over the course of the season, you'll probably do this maybe 3 or 4 times to your pepper plants. That will help turn a mess into something better supported. You can really see there are some massive harvests on some of these pepper plants. The next topic is all about pruning peppers. Here is my advice: don't. A lot of people out there will tell you when your pepper plants are young and freshly transplanted, you should cut them back because that is going to encourage branching and they're going to become bushier, and therefore a bushier pepper plant is going to produce more flowers and a bigger crop. I don't know if that's true or not, but I can tell you this. I have never pruned my pepper plants in my life, and they get plenty bushy and they set tons of flowers and tons of fruits, and I get massive harvests out of them. Here's what will happen for sure, though, if you prune your pepper plants to encourage bushing. You are going to set them back. They're going to go through about a 1 to 2 week period where they are going to stall, and then it's going to take another 2 weeks for them to grow back and start bushing out again. So by pruning them, you're going to basically delay the whole process of flowering and fruiting by several weeks, best case scenario. Meanwhile, these plants are growing plenty bushy on their own, and I never trim them back, and I never set them back. Just look how incredibly bushy these pepper plants are, just on their own, and they are absolutely loaded with flowers, loaded with blooms, and loaded with fruits. I mean, look at this Peperoncini pepper right here. Believe it or not, I have already taken several peppers off of this plant, and it is just producing like gangbusters. Here's a nice cherry pepper right here, loading up with tons of cherry peppers in there, and it's still so early in the season. I have never needed a reason to preemptively prune my pepper plants, and they just go absolutely bananas. I need to amend my statement. I have never preemptively pruned my pepper plants early in the season in hopes that they would become bushier and set more flowers and fruit. I have, however, rejuvenation pruned them midsummer. I've had summers that were so hot, wet, and humid that my pepper plants got bad disease. So I cut them back in the middle of the summer, and then I gave them strong water-soluble fertilizers as well as granular organics, and they put on a whole new flush of growth and a whole another crop of flowers and fruits that I was able to harvest from the end of the summer all the way until frost. Rejuvenation pruning I have done. However, this brings me to the myth that peppers should be planted in full sun. Peppers are not a full sun species. They are a part shade species. You see those pine trees right there? Those are full sun species. They are canopy trees. They are always in the sun. But these peppers are a little bit shorter. These are not pioneer species. They are scrubby little underbrush species. They adapted to grow underneath forest canopy. They did not adapt to grow out in full sun, in open fields and in open farms, and in wide open garden beds with no protection. Peppers hail from the tropical and subtropical forests of Central and South America. So they're from places that don't experience frost and freeze, and they can meander along in the dappled light underbrush and grow for as long as it takes. But you see, when they were brought to places like Europe and North America, things changed, and that is because we have truncated growing seasons. The United States was basically settled in the Northeast and New England first, and then migrated out to the Great Lakes. So they couldn't plant these frost-sensitive species in ground until the end of May, and their first frost would come in September or early October. So they were all planted out in the sun to give them as much photosynthesis as possible so they would grow as fast as possible and they would flower and fruit as quickly as possible. These peppers could generally tolerate the full sun, Northeast, New England, and the Great Lakes where the summers are very brief and mild. But things have changed since then. Much of the population has migrated to the Midwest, to the South, to the West Coast, where the growing seasons are much longer and the sun is a lot stronger with very high UV, and it just pounds the life out of the pepper plants, and that is why they stall out come midsummer. These plants ideally would be grown in dappled light for as long as possible, or they would only be given morning light. In a pepper's perfect world, they would get the morning light from sunrise to about 11 a.m., maybe noon, and then they would be completely enshrined in the afternoon by a shade tree and get no afternoon sun or spend all day, every day, under gentle dappled light. So if you notice that your peppers are stalling or they're starting to wilt come the afternoon in the middle of the summer, that's because they are not a full sun species. They are a part shade dappled light species. But most of us don't have huge backyards with perfect east-facing exposures that give us plenty of afternoon shade. And even if we did, that may actually work against us early in the season and late in the season when the sun is weak. For most of us, the best way to plant peppers is out in full sun during the spring. And then when we get the most powerful sun for the 45 to 60 days of dead summer, we put shade cloth overhead. What I like to do personally is I put 40% shade cloth above my pepper plants from about June 15th to August 15th, because that is when the sun is the most intense. And that gives them basically full sun to grow in the spring, uninterrupted, so they grow really quickly. But then they get that protection when the sun is vicious in the middle of the summer. And that prevents the notorious pepper stall. Now, this year is going to be a little bit different because I built a full roof over this part of my garden, and I put a 15 mil greenhouse plastic tarp on the roof. And that tarp is basically going to act as a 20 to 30% shade cloth because it blocks a lot of the UV. So basically, even though my peppers are going to be in full sun, the amount of UV protection the tarp is going to give me is going to have a similar effect as the shade cloth. Assuming that you don't have a roof over your garden, for most of you, shade cloth is going to be the easiest and cheapest way to protect your peppers when it gets really, really hot. And the good thing about this is going to reduce the amount that you have to irrigate them. You're going to get a lot less disease on your peppers because they are going to be a lot less stressed, and you're not going to get that stall. They are going to produce lots of flowers all throughout the heat of the summer when they would otherwise give up on you when it gets too hot. Now, of course, the exception is if you live in a cool summer or short season climate. If you live in the Pacific Northwest, the upper Midwest, if you live in New England or the Northeast where you have growing seasons of 160 days or less, and it's difficult for you to grow peppers as is, obviously you don't want to use sun protection. You want to plant them out in the open. I'm specifically talking about places where their peppers start to wilt come the middle of the day in the summer, where you have issues with fungal diseases, where you can clearly see a detriment due to the strength of the sun. So if you live in a place with a long, warm, growing season, chances are the shade cloth is going to be highly beneficial. The next step is to aggressively pick your peppers. One of the biggest mistakes that gardeners make when it comes to growing peppers is they don't regularly harvest the crops on the plants, and that will suppress their ability to flower and bloom. The way you get pepper plants to flower and produce like crazy is to constantly harvest off of them. And if you fail to do that, and they're weighed down by big heavy crops that are maturing on the plant, that will suppress their ability to bloom. Peppers are no different than any other plant. Their whole point of existing is to produce mature seed and perpetuate the species. So if you let all of the fruits on the plant sit there and hang until full maturity, not only are you suppressing the plant's ability to flower and fruit because it has to carry and maintain that big heavy fruit load and feed those fruits, but you're also signaling to the plant that it's producing mature seed and there's no reason to overproduce. But what will happen is if you aggressively pick your pepper plants, that sends a signal to the plant that something is going wrong. There is a pest in the area that is pilfering all of the fruits and the plant is failing to produce mature seed. So those plants are going to react by overproducing peppers. They are going to say, oh my goodness, we're not making mature seed. Double down on fruit production. So the more you harvest, the more you are going to get from your pepper plants. Don't be lazy with the harvesting. The more you pick, the more you get. The next step is to supplement your plants with water-soluble fertilizers. Remember earlier, I told you that you should be giving your plants granular organic fertilizers every 2 weeks? Well, after you apply them, you should wet them down with water-soluble fertilizers. And this is how you really take production into hyperdrive. None of the production of our pepper plants come free. Yes, they can absorb sun via photosynthesis and make plant food, but they still need NPK and micronutrients from the soil. So we have to amend the soil with fertilizers because the plants demand far more from the soil than the soil can make itself. And yes, granular organics will give the plants what they need to survive. But if you really want them to thrive and overproduce, the water solubles are where it's at because the water solubles have already been broken down to the point where, when you apply them, the plants can immediately uptake them and start putting those nutrients to good use. They don't have to wait for the soil microbiology to break down the granular organics to get the food they want. Here's my recommended routine. I'm going to take 3 1 and 1 2-gallon watering cans, and I'm going to add to that 1 TBSP per gallon of a synthesized 20-20-20, such as Jack's 20-20-20. Now, if you don't have this product, the fastest and easiest to get off the shelf substitute would be something like Miracle Grow Tomato, but I do like the Jack's product better. That is not organic, but I find it works miracles. Then on top of that, I'm going to add a few tablespoons of Alaska fish fertilizer, which is organic. I like to mix the organics in because the organic fertilizers are more complete, and they have all of the trace micronutrients that are found in whole foods. So we'll add about 2 to 3 TBSP per gallon of the Alaska fish fertilizer, and then we will fill the watering cans up with water, and then I'll mix everything around really well to make sure it is fully dissolved. Every 2 weeks, I take the granular organic fertilizer blend that I showed you how to make earlier, and I place about 1 and 1.12 to 2 TBSP at the base of each plant successively, and I do this up and down each of the rows to all of my pepper plants in an efficient assembly line-like fashion. And when that's all done, I take the water-soluble fertilizers and I water in the slow-release granular organics because the granular organics have to become moist in order to facilitate the decomposition process. They won't break down well if they are dry, so it's important that we put down the granular organics first, then the water solubles on top of them. My final recommendation is to please consider installing drip irrigation to your raised garden beds. I have drip irrigation run to all of my raised garden beds here, and it makes the process so simple. Not only will you save countless hours of time, but you will save so much money on your water bill over the long run because drip irrigation is so much more efficient than overhead watering. Because overhead watering not only spreads disease, but it also evaporates a lot, whereas the drip irrigation penetrates deeply into the soil, so you don't lose all of that water to the evaporation process. Now, to be completely honest, I don't apply the water-soluble fertilizers to my garden the way I show you in this video. Most people will want to use watering cans, but I just showed that as a demonstration. What I actually do is I use a fertilizer injector that I then inject the fish fertilizer and the 20-20-20 into my drip irrigation system from my tap outside, and that evenly distributes all of the water solubles to my whole raised garden bed. One last tip. Did you know that peppers are not annuals? They are actually perennials. It's true. If they're not subjected to frost and freeze and disease and pests, peppers can grow many years. In fact, I have overwintered a pepper plant for 6 years. This right here is a pepper plant that I dug up last year. So it is a year and a half old and I overwintered it in my sunroom. And look at this beauty right here. This thing is absolutely loaded with peppers. So if you have a really productive handful of plants, you can save some of them and dig them up at the end of the year and overwinter them and pick peppers all winter long, or at the very least get a huge head start on your growing season next year. And that right there is everything that I have learned to have huge harvests of peppers all throughout the growing season, all the way until frost. Well, Dale, I ran out of fresh homemade food for you, so we have to do one meal of boring old dry food. But that's okay because we have a hard-boiled egg for daily. This is going to be for you. I just have to crack it open. Ready? Crack, crack. All right, Mr. Dingle, we have some nice sliced egg that we will add, and I bought you some beef to make you for tomorrow. So we'll have fresh hungries tomorrow, okay? Aw, he's so good. He's going to sit and wait like a good boy. Come on. Whoop, he teleported. Okay, Mr. Handsome Pants. Enjoy the egg. I made you some blueberry banana bread for dessert, dog safe, with some cinnamon that we can have with our yogurt tonight. This boy is spoiled. If these lessons change the way you look at your pepper garden, please subscribe and like the channel. We are uncovering the secrets of the soil that others have forgotten. Plant your future today. The next harvest of knowledge will be ready soon.